on Unsolved Mysteries. A 10-year-old girl is abducted and brutally murdered. 2 men are sentenced to death for the crime, but many think they didn't do it. A dog rescues a total stranger from drowning. A pet pig gets help for its owner, fighting for life after a heart attack. What turned these animals into life-saving heroes? On a lonely country road, a young woman is attacked by a total stranger. Detectives need your help to find him. And a woman recalls repressed memories of a couple who rescued her from a violent home life. Now she wants to find that couple to thank them. Join me for these intriguing stories, plus updates on cases solved by you. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Naperville, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago.
What do you think? You think that'll match?
Tris Nicarico and her friends arrive home from school to find that someone has broken into the house. But the problem is much more serious. Her little sister, Jeanine, is missing. Chris calls the police immediately. They find the front door has been knocked in. A footprint remains on the door. Another footprint is found in the yard under the window. A sheet and blanket are missing. Jeanine is gone.
It appeared to me, and I'm sure a couple other guys too, it was like it was a burglary maybe that went bad. She wasn't supposed to be home. Somebody kicks in the door, next thing you know she's home, and they take her.
2 days later, the young girl's body was discovered in a wooded park less than 2 miles from her home. 10-year-old Jeanine Nicarico had been raped and beaten to death. 2 men would be convicted of killing Jeanine Nicarico. Both were sentenced to death. But after another man confessed to the crime, one of the lead detectives on the case began to fear that the wrong man would be executed for the crime. From the beginning, the rape and murder of Jeanine Nicarico was a high-profile, high-priority case. The offer of a $10,000 reward prompted a man named Alex Hernandez to contact investigators. Hernandez told police that he'd been drinking with several men who had talked about a murder.
We were talking to him, and he said something about some
You got a
girl.
last name, Alex?
No,
Hernandez named names, but only one provided a possible link to the murder. Steve Buckley owned a pair of boots with treads similar to the print found on the front door of the Nicarico home. Buckley became a suspect, but police also began to think that Alex Hernandez knew much more than he was telling.
There was somebody who told us about sitting in a car. We figured maybe now he's just trying to shift the guilt away from from himself, and maybe he's involved. So he was a prime suspect.
Hey man, how about them cigarettes?
But investigators needed more evidence to link Hernandez to the murder. So they set a trap. Police put Hernandez in a room with a man he knew from his neighborhood, nicknamed Penguino. Penguino had been told to pretend that he knew about a murder. Hernandez was told that he would get a $10,000 reward if he convinced Penguino to talk about the murder.
I just split it up between you, or you can take it home. I don't care. Somebody come up with something today.
A detective listened in the hallway outside.
We figured that would be a perfect way, if he knew anything. Hopefully all it was is to get out some information that he was holding back. Hopefully he would talk easier to his peer, somebody that he knew.
The meeting turned into a boasting contest. Penguino did as he was instructed, pretending that he knew about the murder of a young boy. Not to be outdone, Hernandez claimed that he knew about Jeanine's murder. He even bragged that he could show police the crime scene. He said, "I was there. I didn't kill her, but I held her down." Police had hit the jackpot, or so they thought. Police drove Hernandez around Jeanine's hometown, expecting him to identify the crime scene, or at least Jeanine's home.
If we didn't run out of gas, we'd probably still be riding. We never found anything. He never could take us anyplace. He rode around looking at houses and places that he hoped would be it, I think, but he never could take us to that place.
Orlando? Cruz? Yeah. Police.
Nevertheless, police followed other leads that Hernandez gave them. One led to a 19-year-old named Rolando Cruz. Unemployed and surviving on food stamps, Cruz had been arrested twice, once for trespassing and once for theft.
You know, Alex Hernandez?
I know him, but I don't hang out with him or anything.
Yeah? When was the last time you saw him?
They asked me about Alex. I told them that I knew what he looked like, his name, but I didn't know him specifically. I didn't hang around with him or anything like that.
Well, we have reason to suspect that Alex was involved in the Carrico murder.
Never heard of it.
So you don't know about the reward?
Like Alex Hernandez, Rolando Cruz seemed to have been tempted by the reward in the Nicaraco case. And like Hernandez, he began to provide police with bits of information about the murder. In the process, both men implicated themselves.
1 year passed from the date of Jeanine's death. There's no, the investigation was going nowhere. There was an election that was coming up. And I just believe that the police took whoever was convenient and whatever evidence, no matter how implausible it was, no matter how weak it was, and said, let's bring a criminal prosecution against these people.
Investigators built their case for over a year. And then a grand jury indicted Alex Hernandez, Rolando Cruz, and Steve Buckley on 36 counts, including murder, rape, and deviated sexual assault. Once the indictments were handed in, police expected the three defendants to implicate each other in order to save themselves. But none of the men attempted to make a deal. For at least one detective, it was a sure sign that this case was seriously flawed.
It was kind of like the air was out of the balloon then. I mean, that was it. It was like we threw our last trump card, hoping that something was going to come from it, and it never did. It felt like right then and there it's time to go on and find someone else. It kind of like, at that point, put it in my mind that these guys just weren't involved.
Yeah.
Detective John Sam wanted to take the investigation in a new direction, but his superiors wanted the case closed. Finally, 1 month before the three men went on trial, Sam handed in his resignation and cleaned out his desk.
Good luck, Sam.
See you, John.
The real killer was still out there, in my opinion, and we, the police, weren't looking for him. If we weren't looking for him, that meant nobody was looking for him. And therefore, he was still out there, and he could either kill again or he just gets away with it. And that, to me, was the worst part of this whole thing.
Steve Buckley's trial ended in a hung jury, and he walked away a free man. But Alex Hernandez and Rolando Cruz were convicted of kidnapping, raping, and killing Jeanine Nicaraco. They were both sentenced to death. Next, a suspect in another murder says that he killed Jeanine Nicaraco and that he acted alone. Ten-year-old Jeanine Nicaraco was abducted from her home and murdered. 2 years later, Alex Hernandez and Rolando Cruz were sentenced to die for the crime. Hernandez and Cruz had been in prison 6 months when another young girl was abducted, raped, and murdered, just like Jeanine. 7-year-old Melissa Ackerman had lived in the next county. Her body was found in a drainage ditch a few miles from where Jeanine's body had been left. A man already under arrest for 3 other sexual assaults was now being charged with killing Melissa. His name was Brian Dugan. The arrest of Brian Dugan raised new questions about the death of Jeanine Carrico. Not only were the two murders similar, Dugan actually told his lawyer that he had killed Jeanine. But Dugan wouldn't formally confess without immunity from the death penalty. Prosecutors were tempted, but could they believe Brian Dugan?
How did you leave the body? In other words, like what position?
Commander Ed Sosowski of the Illinois State Police came up with a list of questions about Jeanine's murder and gave them to Dugan's attorney.
How you doing? Got a couple of questions. What kind of a car were you driving on February 25th of '83?
In '83, I was driving a green Volare.
Dugan said that on the day Jeanine was murdered, he didn't go to work. His employer confirmed his absence. Dugan said he prowled through Naperville, smoking marijuana. Sometime in the early afternoon, he knocked on the front door of the Carrico home.
Hello, who is it?
I need to borrow a screwdriver.
Sorry, I'm not allowed to open the door for strangers. Try next door. Sorry.
Okay.
In point after point, Dugan's description matched the evidence. Dugan claimed that he bound and gagged Jeanine. He described the sheet in which he wrapped her and remembered that he had taken time to wipe his fingerprints from the doorknob. He also said that he was wearing boots that matched the print found on the front door. Dugan described driving Jeanine to a park called the Illinois Prairie Path. There, he raped her and beat her with a tire iron and left her for dead. Dugan's story also matched the testimony of two tollway workers who had reported seeing a white man driving a green car on the day of the murder. Dugan remembered seeing the men and said that as he drove out of the park, he almost got stuck trying to turn around.
Did you see that?
The tires on his car had treads that matched the tire prints left at the crime scene.
He said, I did it, and here is how I did it, and here are the details of what I did, and he said it in such a way as to permit the Illinois State Police to corroborate each and every of the 50 or so details he gave to Commander Sosowski and prove that he and he alone did the crime.
A polygraph confirmed that Dugan was telling the truth. Nevertheless, DuPage County prosecutors never charged him with Jeanine's murder and never offered him a plea deal.
This case is like a runaway train in the sense that the prosecutors convicted two men and yet refused, in light of overwhelming evidence, which showed that they had made a mistake, to admit that mistake.
5 years after the murder, the state Supreme Court ruled that Cruz and Hernandez should not have been tried together and ordered new, separate trials for each. Alex Hernandez was ultimately released after successfully appealing his conviction. When Rolando Cruz went on trial for the second time, his attorneys intended to prove that Brian Dugan alone was responsible for Jeanine's murder. The prosecution set out to prove that Rolando had, at the very least, been an accomplice to the murder. The shoe prints found outside the Carrico home were key elements in the prosecution's case. They were evidence that several people, not just Brian Dugan, were involved in abducting and killing Jeanine.
They said to our jury, there are 3 different sets of footprints. It must have been 3 different people involved in the crime.
The prosecution's argument was convincing.
The jury finds the defendant, Rolando Cruz, guilty of the offense of murder.
I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how anybody could have said guilty again. And I just thought as well, just gotta keep fighting these people. I mean, can't give up. And after all these years, you don't give up.
It was only after the trial that Cruz and his attorneys learned that the footprint evidence was false. The imprint under the window was a woman's size 6.5, not even close to fitting Rolando Cruz. The jury, however, never heard about the shoe size. Prosecutors claimed that they were unaware of the discrepancy.
They knew that Rolando and Alex and Stephen Buckley couldn't have made those footprints, and they lied about it. Now, that's misconduct, and you shouldn't be afraid of the word prosecutorial misconduct. You should point your finger and say, you were wrong.
With Rolando Cruz on death row, prosecutors decided not to put Brian Dugan on trial, despite his intimate knowledge of the crime.
How can you sit there and say, we're going to execute you, and though this other person confessed, we think he's lying personally, so we're not putting him on the stand? Well, it's not. My understanding is it's not for the state to decide whether I'm guilty. It's for the jury. So put Dugan on the stand, let the jury hear what Dugan's got to say. Let him either be totally discredited or let us prove he's telling the truth. And let the jury determine what the outcome is.
Update. Rolando Cruz spent nearly 11 years on death row before DNA evidence finally confirmed his innocence. Cruz was released from prison and fully exonerated. The DNA test finally convinced authorities to charge Brian Dugan with the murder of Jeanine Nicarico, 22 years after her death. He was later convicted and sentenced to death. Next, what would make a dog and a pig each risk their lives to save a human? There's a lot we don't know about the animals that we live with, including when they might suddenly become heroes. So, you think your pet would risk its life to save yours? Watch this. Seaside, Oregon.
Go, 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 go.
Annette McDonald and her dog Norman often walk along the Oregon coast. Norman is a yellow lab, the kind of dog used to guide the blind. But in this case, those roles are reversed. Norman is blind, and Annette guides him.
When Norman's gonna bump into something, I just say, easy, easy. If I throw the stick and he doesn't hear where it lands and he goes the wrong direction, I tell him to go the other way. I just say other way, and he'll usually turn around and go the right way.
One August day, they were on the beach when Norman suddenly ran off.
Norman! Norman!
He just took off like a bullet. I was surprised that he could even run that fast.
Annette tried to call him back, worried that he would hurt himself. But he completely ignored her. 15-year-old Lisa Nibley was caught in the dangerous undertow of the incoming tide. Norman started swimming straight towards her.
I couldn't believe that he knew what to do, that he knew somebody needed him and he went and did it. It was incredible.
When Lisa saw Norman heading toward her, she stopped screaming. Norman became instantly disoriented. Annette realized that he had been following Lisa's voice.
Call him! His name is Norman! His name is Norman! Call him! He'll come to you! Norman! Norman!
The moment Lisa called him, Norman swam straight towards her.
It was the most helpless moment in my life. I'm not a swimmer, and I wouldn't have been able to save her. It was all depending on him.
When he swam out to me, he kind of looked at me in my face and kind of like he was saying, grab a hold of me, I'm gonna help you.
Lisa grabbed Norman and then lost her grip. Her arms were shaking with fatigue. Norman came back for another try.
Norman!
He turned around and like swung himself around so I could grab the back of him so he could swim and I could hold on to him. I think he knew that he had to help me. He knew what he was doing.
Norman towed Lisa toward shore as though he had been trained for it all his life.
he's my guardian angel, and I mean, I was so happy that happened, that he saved me, and it was amazing.
What mysterious instinct inspired Norman to risk his life for a total stranger? And how did he even know that Lisa was drowning? Lisa herself has no answers, but she will always be grateful. On the shore of Lake Erie, Jo Altsman was relaxing in her vacation trailer while her husband was out fishing. Suddenly, she felt a pain in her chest and her left arm went numb.
Help! Help! Help me!
No one in the campground heard her cries. No one except Lulu, her pet pot-bellied pig.
Help me!
Jo's pain increased and she was terrified that she would die. Seconds passed, then minutes. She was getting weaker.
Hello? Is anybody home?
Help me! I'm having a heart attack. Call 911. The phone is at the center.
All right, I'll get some help. I'll get an ambulance. Just hold on, I'll be right back.
Within minutes, paramedics were rushing Jo to the hospital.
They took me to the emergency room and admitted me, and they said in even 15 minutes I would have no quality of life or I would have died.
But how did the young men happen to arrive just in the nick of time? Just ask that guard pig, Lulu. From the moment Jo fell to the ground, Lulu seemed to know something was very wrong. She ran to the kitchen and squeezed herself through the dog door, scraping her belly raw. Outside, Lulu threw herself against the gate, battering it until it broke. Lulu went to the campground's main crossroads and parked herself in the middle of the road, forcing drivers to back up or swerve around her.
She'd come back in through all the doggy door and scrape her belly and check on me and put that big mug of hers over my face. And she'd go back out through everything and do everything again. It just seemed like I'd hollered forever and Lulu had run back and forth forever. And nobody came.
But Lulu wasn't willing to give up. Finally, someone got the message from Lulu. Lulu's behavior defies explanation. Did she actually think up a plan to save Jo's life? Animal behaviorists might credit pack instinct or a genetically programmed response to fear pheromones. But Jo has a simpler answer. Lulu loves her.
Every morning I thank God that she was there. And every morning I thank her. Lulu literally saved my life.
Coming up on a lonely country road, a young woman is attacked by a total stranger. In the Dallas suburb of Richardson, Texas, a well-dressed woman fainted at a bus station and was rushed to a local hospital. She had no memory of who she was or why she was there. This photograph was taken the day that she was found. She told hospital workers that her name was Sandra Evans. However, the tag on her luggage said Linda Kennedy. Sandra said the handwriting was hers, but the name was not. Inside the bags were several photographs. One of Sandra as a bride, another showing two young children, and finally, a picture of a teenage girl, perhaps a high school graduation portrait.
Like there's a wall across my brain, and it won't let me see the other side. Occasionally a snapshot comes through, and I get a glimpse of a life before, but nothing solid, nothing concrete.
Sandra believes her amnesia is the result of some traumatic, perhaps violent experience. She is haunted by a vague fear of both her past and her future.
I am afraid of what I'm going to find on the other side because something made me forget it. I am afraid that if I've had children, that they won't understand where I've been for the last 5 months.
Update. Just moments after this story aired in Canada, a viewer identified Sandra Evans as her sister, Carol Ann Rozak of London, Ontario. Carol Ann soon learned that she was divorced. The photographs found in her luggage were of her 2 sons, now teenagers, and her 13-year-old daughter.
When I talked to my daughter, I asked her about things that we had done, and she said we did everything together. She said we were real close. In fact, the first time I talked to her, it was more like she was the mother and I was the daughter. She was so sweet. She was so excited to talk to me.
Even though the information about her past did nothing to jog her memory, Carol Ann immediately began packing for her return to Canada. There, her children, 4 sisters and a brother, would be waiting to welcome her. 6 months after she disappeared, Carol Ann arrived at the Dallas airport to board a flight that would take her back to her family.
Oh yes, I'm happy to go home. A little nervous, but I'm happy to be going home.
Carol Ann is back in Milton, Ontario. She still has no idea what caused her amnesia, but she's hoping that ongoing therapy will help her fully recover her memory. Near the town of Putnam, Connecticut, a woman we'll call Carol was headed to work along a quiet 2-lane highway. Carol worked as a social worker at the local hospital. This particular morning, she was running late.
The road I took that morning was my normal road in the way that I always go to work. Sometimes I think I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, why me? I didn't do anything wrong. As I was driving, I all of a sudden came upon a black truck that was in front of me. It was driving very slow, so I slowed up right behind it.
The truck began to swerve, speed up, and slow down erratically, and cross the center line as if it was out of control.
Shortly after that, he stopped the truck in front. I can see it all happening in slow motion. He just slid out of his truck, and I realized he had a gun in his hand. I can remember seconds after it happened that I was gonna die. I just felt or heard a rushing in my ears. And then I heard the radio on, and I knew that I wasn't gonna die. So my next thought was, I'm paralyzed.
Carol was semi-conscious and slumped across the front seat. Other drivers could not see her. A few minutes passed before a utility serviceman drove by. From his elevated cab, he could see into Carol's car. He immediately called for help. EMTs knew that they were racing against the clock. Carol had already lost 2 pints of blood. Carol was barely alive when she reached the hospital. The bullet had torn through her face, about 2 inches below her left eye. Her carotid artery had been severed, paralyzing her left vocal cord.
Immediately following the shooting, we had troopers and detectives on Bremen Hollow Road and all the main intersections looking for both the suspect vehicle and also a vehicle similar in style to the one driven by the victim.
2 drivers told police that in the hours before the shooting, a black pickup truck had pulled on and off the highway repeatedly, taunting other motorists.
It's entirely possible that all of the incidents are related. It was the same black pickup truck involved in all these incidents. It appears that it's a totally random shooting, and the victim just happened to be the next motorist to encounter this fella on Bremen Hollow Road. It's the general feeling of investigators that the suspect is still out in the area, still going to work, still going to the same gas station. He's just your average citizen who, for whatever reason on this particular Monday morning, either under the influence or angry, we just don't know what provoked him to do this.
3 months later, Carol's condition improved dramatically, but she was left with a grim reminder of the incident. The bullet that had pierced her cheek is still lodged in the back of her neck, close to her spine.
At first, I thought about the bullet being in me every day, half wanting it out and not being in me. I'm afraid that if I do go through an operation, that something may go wrong and it could be worse. So I will just leave the bullet in me until there's complications or pain.
We have a motiveless crime at this point. We're not able to determine any particular reason why this gentleman would get out of his truck and, without any provocation, shoot the only other person around him in the face, and do it so very quickly and leave the girl for dead. We don't have any idea why someone would do that.
I think of it every day, especially when I look in the mirror and I see the scars and think about the incident, that I'm afraid and I'm also angry that this happened to me and that he's still out there and maybe leading his normal life without any cares to what happened to my life.
The shooting took place near Putnam, Connecticut. The suspect is a white male, 5 feet 10 inches. He has a medium build and brown curly hair. He was driving a well-maintained black step-side pickup truck. It had flared fenders, standard with black wall tires, and shiny plain wheel covers. Next, one woman's repressed memories cause her to seek out the parents that she barely knew she had. Irvington, New York.
I have this vague feeling that
Miriam was in her 40s when she started psychotherapy. She had thought that her childhood had been a happy one, so she was surprised to experience fragmented flashbacks of shocking events.
Oh my God!
I had this image like a mummy was the only thing I could liken it to. It was so terrifying and so frightening. And I became so petrified by it. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't understand what was going on.
Miriam's journey into her past triggered a flood of memories that refused to go away.
I found myself getting up at night and sitting on the floor in the bathroom. And all of these memories started coming back of my father attacking me, of my father being subdued by the police.
What would happen is that she began to become subject to what she called flashbacks. These would be images that would suddenly come out of nowhere and grab her in such a way that she would just be paralyzed for the instant that it occurred.
I don't know.
Those flashbacks indicated that there was a certain amount of abuse that went on very early in life that she did not have a handle on, and there was a big part of her that did not want to deal with it.
I only remembered good things about my father. And to suddenly have a whole new side of him revealed to me was a terrible shock. And I remember saying in therapy, I don't want this to be true. I don't want to believe this about my father.
Miriam was her parents' only child. Although her father had often been unpredictable, Miriam's conscious recollections of him had always been happy ones. But gradually, fragments of her childhood memory came together to form a different picture. The recreations you are about to see are based on Miriam's memories.
I'll see you later, Miriam.
Bye. Can I have that coconut?
see why not.
Honey, I don't think that coconut's ripe yet.
Honey, what are you talking about? A coconut is ripe when it falls off the tree. It's fine.
Miriam, would you rather have some crackers?
Crackers? She said she wanted a coconut. What is the big deal?
Oh, not with that knife.
So now your mommy's an expert on coconuts, huh? Why are you looking at me like that?
I remembered that he grabbed me, and my father was attacking me. And somehow, I guess I kicked him enough to hurt him, and he put me down or dropped me or whatever. I remember watching from a hiding place where he finally left me alone. My father, I mean, he was ranting. Somehow policemen were there.
Miriam remembers hospital orderlies with the policeman trying to subdue her father.
I was terrified beyond anything I can possibly relate to you. I don't know how to tell you the terror that I felt.
Some ice cream?
Miriam believes that her father suffered from severe mental illness. She now feels certain that while her mother tried to cope, Miriam herself was taken away.
When I started having these flashbacks, I started thinking about Mommy and Daddy. And the images that went with my parents weren't the images that were popping in my mind, and I didn't know who these people were. I suddenly realized there were people in my life that were important to me, and I didn't know who they were.
I brought you something to eat. You're really afraid. It's all right.
I remember I was absolutely frightened out of my mind. Slowly, I realized that this was a safe place, that these people were kind, and they weren't going to hurt me, and they were loving, and I was very happy there.
What are you coloring, sweetheart?
As the gates of a repressed memory opened, Miriam recalled being placed with loving foster parents.
My foster father had white hair, and he was a young man. It was very striking. I remember his hands. I remember that they were strong and powerful hands that made me feel very safe.
Bye.
Miriam believes she called her foster parents Daddy Mike and Mommy Pat. Mike was a fireman, and Pat sang her to sleep with Irish lullabies.
I just remember being hugged and kissed and just playing with Mommy Pat's ringlets and the overwhelming sense of being loved. They thought I was the most wonderful child in the world, and I really delighted in that.
We have to talk to you. There's some people.
But unhappy memories soon intruded. First, a serious discussion with Mike and Pat. Miriam sensed that she was about to lose them.
Baby, what's important is that we love you.
We always love you. Always love you.
After hearing the testimony of all the parties...
Miriam then remembers herself in a courtroom sitting with a social worker. Her birth parents were there, as well as Pat and Mike.
It's the decision of this court that Miriam Parton be returned to their natural parents.
I was very, very distraught. I did not want to leave them. As far as I was concerned, these are the people I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I really didn't remember about that kiss for a very long time. Actually, it didn't come until almost the very, very end of all my memories. In fact, that was probably one of the very last flashbacks I had. And somehow, that I love you that came across in that kiss has been enough for me to make peace with the loss and to go on with my life and just keep their memory in my soul and in my heart.
Miriam lived with her natural parents until she got married. At the age of 47, she began her search for Mike and Pat.
Their names were Pat and Mike, and I think their last name was McGuire.
In repeated flashbacks, we got the beautiful picture of these marvelous foster parents. And without these months with two loving parents, she might not have survived.
They gave me a lot. They saved me from despair, and I would like them to know that there was a good outcome. I just pray that their lives are wonderful and that they've had happiness, and I hope that I'll get a chance to be reunited with them and share with them the good things that I have in my life.
Update. After our broadcast, a friend of Pat and Mike's sent Miriam this photograph of Pat. It was taken when she was in her 30s. The friend confirmed that Pat and Mike had indeed cared for a little girl around the same time that Miriam remembers being with them. Members of their church also confirmed that Miriam's memory is accurate, but Pat and Mike McGuire have yet to be found.